the media is not a person, and the media is not an organization. The media, if you look it up, is just a plural of medium, and a medium is like a means of transmitting information. So the media is just some vague, broad concept that people refer to because, for whatever reason, maybe I should put it that way, I don't think most people have any idea how journalism works or how it is supposed to work. Like when I ask people, what is the purpose of a journalist? 9 times out of 10, they cannot give me a satisfactory answer. And it doesn't have to be the exact way that I, spelled it out. It could be something similar to that, and that would be fine, but usually they have no clue.
Hey there, BitSquad. Today, I'm joined with Charles Bovaird. He is the senior contributor at Forbes. We're going to be talking about media, crypto media, how it affects markets, what separates, what we see in the world of crypto from standard journalism. We're going to be talking about all that today. I think it's a very interesting conversation. So first and foremost, Charles, welcome to the channel. Glad to have you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I guess let's start, just kind of tell everybody a little bit about your background and, what you do right now.
Sure. I'm a financial writer and editor. I am a senior contributor for Forbes. Where I work for the section Forbes Crypto, and the division I work for is Forbes Money and Markets. I am a vice president of content for a financial services firm called Quantum Economics, which was founded and is currently run by Mati Greenspan. More specifically, he's the founder and CEO. I've been doing financial writing for about a decade now. I actually started out with more traditional assets. And then after a while, I got into crypto. I mean, the thing is, when I first started working as a financial writer full time, it was back in 2011. Mm-hmm. So I don't think all that many people had heard of Bitcoin. It certainly had not made Bloomberg or anything like that yet.
Yeah. So, when did you start to see that change?
I'd say 2013, if memory serves, when the Winklevoss twins filed for the first Bitcoin ETF. That was when I first remembered seeing Bitcoin in a major place like Bloomberg.
Yeah. And just news update, that ETF still not approved. 9 years later. So,
yeah.
In the world of crypto, we deal with, really two basic, kinds of thoughts. You have the technical analysis side, which is what is going on the charts, on the financial charts. You don't need any background to understand what's happening there. You look at candles and you can make, decisions and assumptions based on what you see. The other part is fundamental analysis. And this is how much news affects the crypto markets. I guess let's just start there with that basic question. How much do you feel like the news in crypto affects the markets?
Well, I think it depends. I mean, it can have a significant effect. I think it's just a question of who's reading the news and how seriously do they take that news. I mean, like if you got some information from somebody and you really trusted them, that would be one thing. And you might go and, it make a significant investment. But if you didn't trust them at all, you might not make any investment. So I guess it's a question of, how seriously, I mean, because the market is a function of retail and institutional investors, making transactions. So it's a question of all these different people who are essentially individual decision makers. How much do they trust what they read in the news? And also, how relevant is it? So, I mean, Craig Wright may have his latest lawsuit nonsense, but I don't really see how that affects the price of Bitcoin,
Yeah, I understand that completely. What kind of relationship do you see, between how much the news can affect the crypto markets versus the traditional markets? In crypto, the market is much smaller. And so we do see like news would have a bigger impact because it doesn't take as much to move it. Do we see news events really, affect the price of, the stock market?
Well, yeah, sure. But I mean, I wouldn't say it's as severe, like you said. I mean, if you take, say, like Bitcoin, I mean, Bitcoin is the world's largest digital currency by market value, but it's still very susceptible to, the influence of major players or whales, if you will, people making major transactions. I mean, and if you take some of the smaller digital currencies, I mean, they're like penny stocks. And so if somebody writes an article about that's, bullish or bearish, it can have a significant impact on the value of that, altcoin, if you will. And I'd say it's probably going to have a far greater impact than it would on, say, I mean, if you have a story about, Apple or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. I think that's a good way to put it. So the news shouldn't really be affecting prices. What is the actual, the goals, the missions of a journalist who's writing articles about, a certain crypto, and they could be positive or could be negative, but what is the role of the journalist in actually creating these stories?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. The purpose of a journalist is to find and report the truth. 5 words. That's all you need. Now, when I say this isn't like the laws of physics. So it's not like gravity, where gravity is gravity, whether you believe it or not. This is just my rendition of journalism. Is the purpose of a journalist is to find and report the truth. So when you say that it shouldn't affect prices, okay, so let's say that a journalist is investigating a digital currency and they find something that is bullish surrounding that digital currency. They may very well write about it. They're not obligated to write about it because they may not find it newsworthy. They may have other deadlines they're working with, et cetera, et cetera. If they find something that isn't so positive, they may very well write about it. And it's at this point where, some of these people in crypto are very enthusiastic about the digital currencies that they have or that they back. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. It's just, if I write an article about a digital currency that isn't necessarily super positive, that doesn't mean I'm coming after your bags. I'm just doing my job. And it's like, there was one time I wrote an article that said Bitcoin is no longer leading the markets, or it was something like that, or is Bitcoin no longer leading the markets? Is Bitcoin losing its status as a market leader? It was something like that. And I remember I wrote this up for Forbes. I published it on Twitter, and one of my responses I got was like fake news and FUD. And I'm like, did you read the article? Because all I did was, it was like during a period of time where it was like Bitcoin went up, but it didn't go up that much. Whereas there were multiple altcoins that were having, there were major altcoins that were having far more compelling returns. And I basically took that market data and I combined it with input I got from different analysts, where they said that there were other digital currencies that were leading the market, at least during that period of time. Now, I'm not saying that, when I wrote this, I never said that Bitcoin was going to lose its luster as the world's largest digital currency. It's just, I was examining that period of time and saying, okay, well, is this indicative of a larger trend? We don't really know. It was that sort of thing.
Yeah, we certainly see a lot of tribalism in crypto,
Yes.
for sure. And it's basically like, if someone writes a story about a specific crypto, you're going to have people that are really excited about it, and then you're going to have people that aren't excited about it. How do you think that affects the journalist? Like, knowing that if they're putting out a certain article, like, let's say, for instance, there was a top 10 project that it was discovered had a major hack or a major bug that nobody knew about, and this reporter is putting that out there, knowing the onslaught of hate that they're going to get, do you think that affects their ability to write?
I'm not sure it necessarily affects their ability to write. It may make them more nervous, and it might also make them, in a way, it could be a good thing though, because think about it, it's like if you're going into a court of law and you're making a case, you better make sure that case is as sound as possible. And if you're going to call somebody out, or if you're going to call out a project, you'd better make sure that everything is verified through multiple sources. Like, if you're going to break a major story. So in a way, it could be a good thing. If it makes people be hyper diligent in terms of examining the information that's out there, I think that's a good thing. Or maybe I shouldn't say hyper diligent, but if they become, if it makes them very thorough.
Yeah. So here's where a lot of this breaks down in the world of crypto. And this is probably some of the more fascinating stuff we'll discuss here, which is Forbes, for instance. You guys are not you're not a crypto publication. You're a financial publication, and you've been around for a long time. And, we're going to leave, the traditional markets pretty much out of this conversation. I want to talk about the crypto media specifically. And I want to talk about 2 organizations, Cointelegraph, or Cointelelie, as I call them, because, we'll talk about the background of them. Basically, early Russian miners created Cointelegraph, and they still have a huge amount of influence on it today. Their CEO is a 1099 worker, for instance. Then you have CoinDesk. CoinDesk is owned by Digital Currency Group. the largest crypto organization pretty much that exists right now. They've got their hands in almost everything from Ripple to Coinbase to Brave browser to Grayscale. They obviously own Grayscale. When you've got these two crypto organizations that have so much vested interest in the prices of crypto, it's almost like it's impossible for people to ever see them as unbiased. And I think for good reason. What do you think the health of the crypto specific media is?
Okay, so I would like to, if I may unpack this a little bit before I even answer your question.
Sure.
I worked for CoinDesk for a year and a half. I published 200 plus articles on their website. I don't think I ever met anyone from DCG. My basic job was to just go write about the markets. And there were times when I would look up different things I wanted to write about, and I'd run it by the editors and be like, oh, hey, what do you think about this? And they'd be like, okay, sure. Or there are times when they'd be like, okay, do you want to write about this? Or this is a big story. Can you write an article about this in addition to whatever you're already writing? Past that, there are disclosures. I mean, yes, Digital Currency Group bought CoinDesk, and then I got hired shortly after. That was actually a pretty good story, because some people say that as soon as your company gets bought, everybody's going to lose their job. But Digital Currency Group bought CoinDesk, and then CoinDesk started hiring people, from what I remember.
Let's wrap this up. Talking about media, a lot of people, they point to the media as, the culprit in a lot of, directions that the country goes in, or that a market goes in, or a company goes in. What do you think is the most misunderstood thing about the media?
Okay, so first of all, the media is not a person, and the media is not an organization. The media, if you look it up, is just a plural of medium, and a medium is like a means of transmitting information. So the media is just some vague, broad concept that people refer to because, for whatever reason, maybe I should put it that way. I don't think most people have any idea how journalism works or how it is supposed to work. Like, when I ask people, what is the purpose of a journalist? 9 times out of 10, they cannot give me a satisfactory answer. And it doesn't have to be the exact way that I, spelled it out. It could be something similar to that, and that would be fine. But usually they have no clue.
Yeah,
so
that's probably true. That most people, it is kind of like, I always make the joke, like, who are they? Because somebody will say something like, well, they say, and you're like, well, okay, but who are they? Nobody can quite pin down who that is.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to say that the state of journalism is filled with an outstanding amount of integrity. I mean, there are absolutely things I see that go wrong. I mean, there are times when, for example, you'll have somebody who will break a news story like CoinGeek, which is obviously a propaganda mill and like nothing close to a news site. I read a CoinDesk article that said they've got less in, they're kind of like the Taco Bell blog, except for the Taco Bell blog provides better information than CoinGeek does. And then the thing is, what will happen sometimes is somebody will break the news, and then all these other journalists will basically jump on the bandwagon, and they'll kind of rewrite this original narrative and then add to it without actually going and fact checking the original narrative, which, I mean, isn't very responsible. And you could call this whatever you would like. I mean, one person, I explained it to him and he called it parroting theory. So, I mean, you could call it that if you want, but this is something that I have legitimately witnessed, is that somebody will break the news, and then other journalists will go and they will repeat that information, whether the information was valid in the first place or not, without actually vetting it. And I mean, there's sometimes when I've seen news show up, like, for example, when there was that fake press release that was released, like allegedly released by Walmart. There was somebody who released a fake press release saying that there was a partnership between Litecoin and Walmart. And then the price of Litecoin went up like 10%. And then I think it was like Reuters and MarketWatch covered it. I can't remember 100%, but I think those places covered it. I mean, it got covered by some major media outlets. And I just remember sitting there thinking to myself, I am not writing about this until, like, you have something more definitive, because the whole thing looks fishy. And then we found out that the whole thing was just a hoax, basically. I mean, Walmart said that they didn't have a partnership with Litecoin, and then the price of Litecoin goes right back down. And then actually I wrote an article that said, like, top things we can learn from this situation.
Yeah,
So,
I think that really, I think the lesson here is you should be skeptical. And I think
oh yes,
when people are doing crypto research, doing crypto research for your investments is, in some ways similar to, investigating a crypto story. And I think there's a lesson here to take is that you should be skeptical of what you're reading. You should
yes,
question what you're reading. And I think
yes.
that's, I feel like sometimes journalists don't like it when people question what they're writing, but yet that's, as a journalist, you have to also be skeptical. So I think that when people are being skeptical in their research of not just crypto news, but also of any, crypto research that you read out there, I think that's going to lead to, better, it could lead to better investment decisions.
Yes. No, I think that you're absolutely right. Skepticism is crucial. I think some people have said that skepticism is indicative of high intelligence. I think that what was it? Descartes said that people should doubt everything that can be reasonably doubted.
Yeah. Are you sure this is correct?
If memory serves, I don't
I was
have,
being skeptical. I was trying to show everybody I was smart.
and then he said, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. Yes, you are 100% right. I would be very skeptical. And I think that, when it comes to some information, like, for example, market news, if somebody gets their information from, CoinDesk or, their information, their price data from CoinDesk or Masari, they're supposed to put where they got their price data. So that stuff is a bit more cut and dried because, if the price of Bitcoin goes up, I can't just make up that it went down. Right. It shouldn't get out there. An article like that shouldn't get out there in the first place. And if it did, it'd probably get eviscerated on social media. But when it comes to stuff that's not so cut and dried, it's a little bit different. So,
well, Charles, this has been a very fascinating interview, and I just want to say, thank you for coming on the show. It's been very enlightening. Where can people find you at?
People can find me on Twitter, or they can find me on LinkedIn. Those are probably the easiest places to find me. Also, my Forbes column. If you simply Google Forbes Bovaird, you can find my Forbes column.
Okay, and we'll make sure to drop some of those links down below in the description so you guys can go check out Charles's writing. So, and to everybody in the audience, let us know what you thought about this interview. And I want to know, do you believe you can trust the crypto media? Do you agree with what Charles is saying, when it comes to being skeptical? Thanks, Charles, for joining us. That's all I got. Be blessed. Good way out.